conferences called WEFTEC, and it does come to this city every other year. We alternate between here and Chicago, and we hit 18,000 people. The attendance was, it's not as high as it used to be, but it was as high as last year's in Chicago, so we're doing well. But it was very well done. We got to showcase some of the things we're doing and making good connections. So it was very, very nice conference, and we're hoping that it's gonna come back in 2 years. So
We intersected, there was another national, little small ACGA, the American Community Gardening Association. We intersected at St. Aug while the WEFTEC people were out there
Oh.
doing their work, so we
no
saw.
wonder our number were not as good as yours.
That's right, it was
That's right.
250 souls from ACGA.
But yeah, I want to focus on the main reason we're here today, and we've been together for about 2 years maybe, and I remember saying that one of the main things that we're hoping to get out of this, and it was obviously hoping for more people, is the honest feedback and the dialogue that we enjoy, and it's been an awesome experience for me, and I hope for you. And I think today is probably one of the most crucial conversations we would have, because it has to do with a big major study we've done, and this is the Black and Veatch team who will be presenting today and talk about our financial standing today relative to our cost of service, all our needs. We're going to introduce this customer affordability program that's a lot more robust than what we have currently. And our approach to this is to go to the public, and you're not the first trial, so to speak, in terms of sharing with you very, very relevant information about our financial standing, show you the gap between what we think we need to be much better utility and what the solutions can be. So we're not dictating any specific numbers or solutions, but we're hoping we will both arrive to the same kind of maybe logical conclusion on behalf of the city. So, so with that, obviously I'm going to encourage you, and I know you won't disappoint. Give us your best. Ask any question, challenge anything you hear or see, because that's the idea, is to learn from you, so we can, as we move on, it reflects, our customer base basically. So we're counting on that.
But no pressure. Represent the entire customer base.
So with that,
Okay, all right, thank you, Ghassan. So what we're going to talk about today, the first thing is we're going to talk about the current situation and the drivers behind the study. We'll talk a little bit about the study components, what we looked at as we walked through the study, looking at both the financial piece as well as the customer impact piece. And then Ann's going to give us more information on the customer implications and the customer assistance program that we've put together. And then we're going to turn it over to Tyler. He's going to talk about the next phase and the public outreach component of the study. So the reason why the study was authorized and why we're here today is because the Sewage and Water Board is facing financial challenges. So you're probably familiar with hearing some of this in the news and in the meetings here at the Sewage and Water Board. Funding for operating expenses is insufficient. There's been consistent deferral of maintenance over the past several years, just because the revenue being generated under your existing rates is not sufficient in order to support the operations and maintenance activities that need to take place for all three systems. The Sewage and Water Board is, in the last several years, trying to get out of working in a reactive mode versus a proactive mode. And we want to be able to continue that going forward, to be more proactive in order to invest more in preventative maintenance than coming at the end and trying to rehabilitate an asset that could have been prevented in the first place. And so with regards to capital, again, there's been underinvestment there. the existing rates do not provide the funding necessary to maintain all of the assets for all three systems. Assets are reaching the end of their useful life. At that point, a decision needs to be made whether to rehabilitate them or replace them. And if, some of that preventative maintenance had been done throughout the life of that asset, some of that additional costs to rehabilitate or replace could be avoided. So making sure that, we need to invest both in maintaining the assets and then also investing in new infrastructure for all three systems. So in order to do that, we have to look at a financial plan and what it's going to cost to fully fund those activities. Revenue adjustments in the past have not kept up with the increased costs. We just got through 8 years of 10% increases, and that's a lot, and that did really help the Sewage and Water Board, but it helped the Sewage and Water Board more in terms of funding the necessary reserves for each of the systems and starting to get things moving again. But it doesn't stop with just those 10% increases. It has to keep going forward. So what we need going forward is additional revenue increases to help make that investment back into the three systems in terms of the capital investment. So we know that asking for more revenue increases now is just going to have even more of an impact on your customers after coming off of the 10% increases. And so included in our plan is a customer assistance program to help mitigate that.
And
Yes.
just to clarify, the 8 years of the 10% had expired or sunset 2 years ago, so we have not had any rate increases in 2021 and 2022. So it didn't just finish.
Right, thank you. So the components that we looked at as part of the rate study, the first was establishing the cash flow pro forma for each utility. And we looked at each system individually. So we're looking at how much revenue each system is currently generating under the existing rates or the existing millage, and then what are the expenses that need to be funded from that revenue. So we're looking at the operating costs, we're looking at the debt service on existing loans or bonds, and then we're looking at then what remaining revenue can be used to help fund capital projects. And so then we look at the capital funding plan. So we're not just looking at next year, we're looking at a multi-year plan. So we're looking out to 2027 when we put together the pro forma and the financing plan. So we looked at the capital improvement program out through 2027. Sewage and Water Board was able to identify projects that have a known funding source, such as projects that are being funded with the WIFIA loan, through FEMA, through grants, through Fair Share. All of that was identified. And then what that leaves us with then are the projects that don't have an identified funding source. And so that's what we need to then address is how are we going to fund those projects? And there's different possibilities. It's issuing more debt to help fund those, trying to get more funding from the federal government and other sources, and then cash financing, that's basically financing with revenue from rates. So those are kind of the options that we have in order to take into consideration for how to fund the projects that don't currently already have an identified funding source. At the same time, though, after funding O&M and funding debt service and funding capital, we also have to make sure that each of the three systems are maintaining their financial metrics. So making sure that they're meeting the coverage requirements on their existing loans, and also making sure that they could meet coverage requirements on any future loans, and then also making sure that each of the three systems maintain the appropriate level of reserves. So all of that goes into putting together that financial plan to get an idea of how much revenue is needed in the future in order to fund all of these activities and these capital needs. So then, as I stated, we also looked at the customer impact and started to put together kind of the skeleton for a customer assistance program. And so we'll take a look at that. And then public engagement is going to be a large piece of this. Once the board makes the resolution to move forward with taking this plan to the public and to the council for approval. That then starts kind of the public engagement period where we have a series of open houses or open meetings and different things like that. And Tyler's going to talk about that more.
Yeah, so thanks, Anna. So typically the way that these processes go, because we are an independent public utility that is given our power through the state rather than the city government, we have some specific state requirements that we're under, that we are the only ones that are under. And one of those is that if we intend to seek a rate increase, we have to notify the Board of Liquidation and the City Council, and then that starts the clock on holding a series of 3 public hearings, transcripts of which have to be transmitted to those public bodies before we're able to take any decisive action on those proposals. What we would like to do this time is sort of flip this process on its head a little bit. So historically, we would have said, all right, we think we're going to need, 10% increases over the next 8 years. And so we go to the community and say, we need 10% increases over the next 8 years. And the community typically has said, no, we don't really want you to do that. And we just muscle it through anyways. Or we try to muscle it through and the city council says no. So this time what we'd like to do is initiate the process, but without actually making a proposal. And having these meetings as more community conversations about what our needs are. So doing a lot of the work that we've already done with this committee by helping to explain, what's on your bill, what are our revenue needs, what are our gaps in terms of the capital projects that we need to do, and in particular, what are the consequences of not doing those projects, so that folks can start to maybe look at a menu of different project priorities and put together an idea of what their priorities are, and therefore what sort of revenue increase they'd be willing to take on in order to cover the costs of those critical projects. And so, obviously some of the topics we want to cover at these meetings are things like our strategic plan, the progress that we've made on certain key projects, our capital improvement priorities, our current situation and system needs, and also address customer satisfaction. The idea would be that these meetings could have sort of like an open house at the beginning where we would have customer service representatives available to help with billing issues or any other issues customers are having, and some other tables that have information on other programs that we have. And the meeting would consist more of a roundtable type of discussion rather than, a presentation and then a microphone where people get up and say their opinion. We would rather lead folks through, some sort of exercise, like I said, where there's a menu of options and there's options for what a rate increase might look like, so that we can make sure that they're able to sort of really understand that while, no option is always an option, and we're certainly open to the idea that maybe a rate increase isn't the right option at this time, that the community understands that if we don't have any additional revenue, there will be consequences for that in terms of either a decrease in level of service or increase in response times to customer issues, et cetera. And give the community the opportunity to provide their feedback in a written form and through these activities, so that way we can summarize this activity, the hope being that we can essentially come to a consensus with the community around which options work best for us and the community, and bring that to the city council as something that's sort of, supported at least in somewhat by the community. I think, what is the next slide? The next one, customer.
Yeah.
So I'll stop there and see if you have any questions about what that process looks like, and any suggestions you might have for how we would conduct them.
What's the timeline again to getting to this stage of it?
So the timeline is aggressive in that we are hoping to have these meetings during November and December, which obviously is not a great time to have public meetings, but obviously in New Orleans, if it's not November and December, then it's during Mardi Gras. If it's not during Mardi Gras, then it's during festival season. And we really can't wait until next summer, because then also it's summer, and then there might be hurricanes. So it's not an ideal time, but I think that we can time them properly so that we can, maybe get one in before Thanksgiving and maybe one in between or a couple in between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and try to make it work. We'd also like to do it so that they're differently timed. We want to do probably one weeknight evening, one maybe weekend morning, one maybe daytime weekday, since we do have to do 3, but making sure that there's availability for folks that have different schedules to be able to attend one of the meetings.
And is there like a number that you're looking for? Like, we would love to reach X number of people?
I think we are really struggling with understanding what we think participation might look like.
Mhm. Help with the
Obviously-
bills, we'll bring them in the door though. I love that open house idea of like starting with like an
Yeah.
open house where people can get their billing questions
Yeah.
addressed.
I really do. I mean, I don't know if y'all, the folks that have been working on this, if we have any ideas. I think we want to reach as many as possible. I
Yeah.
don't think that there's like a limit to the number of folks we'd like to reach. But I think we are struggling a bit with like how many table facilitators do we have, for instance, because you don't know if you're going to get 10 or 1,000.
Right.
I mean, if we have a full house, standing room only, that'd be an awesome experience. We're obviously leaning on you to generate interest and help us maybe, connect with folks, so to make sure that everybody who wants to be a part of this that can.
Mhm.
We're gonna host 3, correct? So, and we're gonna obviously strategically put them in, around the city to make sure we're meeting people where they need to be met. So, what do you think about I know you like the open house, the ideas or the things to share. Is it the one before that? Anything that we've talked about here that you thought would be an interest that is not on the list, or?
Well, just something that came up when, with regard to the stormwater fee, was this idea of starting with, like, everything you said about, like, laying it out, like, this is what the gaps are, this is what we need, but also sort of this, kind of guided, what would you like to see happen in the ideal world? What would you like, what do you imagine seeing? And I think people might need help, like, kind of being provided a framework to have
Mhm.
that. But I think imagining this other,
What the realistic options can be.
yeah, what the realistic options can be and how that would translate into, quality of life for them in
Right.
very real ways. So it sounds like it's not just about like going through a laundry list of this, and this, but also like soliciting, thoughts from the.
Yeah, I think to feed off of what you just said as well, I think what you're seeing here is kind of a push of information
Mm-hmm.
versus that
Solicitation.
that's pull of information
Right,
or
yes.
engagement and really hearing from, but also how they can be collectively involved and engaged in
Yeah,
that
that'd be
process. And I
part
think that's
two.
what's missing here is that piece.
Yeah, I think that we're still working on developing what that table activity looks like. I think that it's probably going to take the form of like essentially some form of analogy around whether it's fixing your car or preparing a meal or something like that, where there's a menu of options available. And some of the things, like we're talking about a car, it's like, an oil change is your operations and maintenance, and so we have to continue to do that. Otherwise, your engine will blow up, and so then it costs a lot more money to fix it. So really try to put it in terms like that, but really connecting it to things like, is the community's #1 priority that we are fixing leaks? Is that going to be the biggest impact on quality of life? So then we know, okay, we probably need to make sure that we prioritize the water main replacement program, perhaps over some of the other programs in the capital improvement program, in terms of figuring out what the additional revenue mix looks like.
I think what I would want to know, and most people would want to ask, and maybe you're getting to this, but I'm pretty sure we're already paying some of the highest rates in the state.
I think we're somewhere down in the middle.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so for instance, right next door, Jefferson Parish, much lower rates. They just did.
Subsidized rates.
They just did it. Okay. They just did a huge bond sale, and over 20 years, I think they're planning on raising the average bill like $7. So if I were the type of person who might say it's getting too expensive here, I'm moving to Jefferson Parish and
Yeah.
it's right next door, then make the case for raising my rates. Why can't Orleans accomplish what Jefferson is accomplishing right next door? Somewhat. A newer system, sure, but not all of it is that much newer, right? So, and I mean, I know part of the answer is, way before you got here, the disinvestment in the system. I know that's part of it, but that average citizen probably doesn't really know that, and it's like, well, if New Orleans is the crown jewel of Louisiana, why can't we accomplish what our neighbors are right next door?
Yeah, I think it's
So-
a fair point, and I think we have plenty of information on why our rates are different from Jefferson's that we can have at the ready. I think there's the fact that they bill bi-monthly instead of monthly. They get an annual CPI increase in their rates that we don't get, so their rates have actually kept up with inflation historically. They also subsidize their rates with property taxes.
Well, but our taxes are higher too.
Well, we also have, property taxes that go to transit and things like that that are much more expensive than their system. There's a lot of reasons why our systems are more expensive, and our water system is on average 50 years older than theirs. So there's a lot of reasons that go into it. Nothing's direct, obviously, but there's a lot of contributing factors to why it's more expensive to run our operating system or our system than theirs, and why our rates are higher.
And I know you had smart metering on the list.
Yep.
That's a huge deal. So like before you raise my rates, get my bill right.
Yep.
Well, on that point, we would also be prepared to share the interim solution, because smart meter is not going to be instant, right? And people are still having some issues. So we do have an interim solution that we will very likely unveil or share at more detail of how it's going to impact favorably everybody's situation as it bridges into rolling out smart meters. So because we know that going to be one of the toughest kind of pushback or basis for pushback is, our bills are so high or inaccurate. Why would I want to give you more money? We understand that.
I think it's important to define that phrase level of service. I'm not sure how many folks think about it that way. I think we've been familiarized with that. And I think the more vivid you can render those scenarios of different ratcheting up in rates and what daily life might be like in those cases, I think the more successful that will be.
Definitely.
Here's an example. See what you think of that. People can relate to either leaky or broken mains, water mains, or sewer backups. A lot of people have had first-hand experience. Maybe one of the exercises would be a water main, and with pictures of when it breaks, what it looks like, the cost implications of fixing that one piece of, and when you backfill it and you repair the pavement, it's still an old main. Then it breaks the next month, and then you repair it again, and you start adding these costs. And at the end of the day, you're spending more on it, and it's still an old main versus replacing it. So, those are the kind of thought process we want people to kind of start going into, because that's what we go through every day.
I could see 3 scenarios of the same street, the same old man.
And it does happen.
Just being really crisp and clear.
Yeah. And the cost implications and the interruptions and the no water while we're fixing, and all the complexities that go with, so just to make it real, so they can, one of many ideas we have, so.
Well, it's like going back to that car example, right? At some point, you can patch it only so far, and then you gotta bite the bullet and make the decision, right?
Yeah.
What am I gonna do? Am I gonna just tough it out? Am I going to buy a new car? Am I gonna lease a new car? Or do I buy something used? A lot of different options, but at some point in time, you do reach that point. And then, you have to balance that against what your personal finances are like. Yes.
So, well, you're going back to, y'all mentioned maintaining assets, which is something I've been dying to talk about in these meetings. Is what is the utilities asset management system? And the reason I ask, and so this is years ago, and I'm sure it's evolved since then, but when I was doing a lot of work on the Recovery Roads program, there were anecdotal So maybe this was just a few projects, but a lot of my colleagues were, getting the 95% plans, and then whoever Sewage and Water Board had on the project delivery unit was like, oh, wait, no, we do want to replace those water mains. And so, the consultant's not mad because they get paid to design it again. But in terms of like making progress in the program, it's really frustrating. And, I'm sure there's all kinds of behind the scenes administrative reasons that at first it was, no, we're not going to replace the mains. And okay, we changed our mind. But I would think that could be mitigated by an organized asset management program where it's like, what are Sewage and Water Board's priorities? What are DPW's priorities? Put them on top of each other. That's your next project. That we got a water main that's 100 years old, and we got a road crumbling on top of it. That's the next project we need to do, and prioritize things that way. Like I said, I'm sure that's happening on some level, but I know there have been plenty of times where it was 95% plans, and oh wait, we're going to change our mind, and we're going to.
Yeah,
We're
I
gonna
don't
do
know
this.
the circumstance that would lead to that, but I can tell you I've left mains that are 50, 60, 70 years old in the ground and repaved on top of them because I didn't have money. Every system has its own funding, right? So if you don't have money to replace it, but you have paving dollars, which we all know it's always in university more available, then you leave it behind. In this case, maybe they found money to at
Sure.
the time when they stuck. Let's just get it done.
So the disconnect that you just mentioned there between what the utility needs to do with respect to the maintenance of the underground assets, as well as what the city or DPW might have to do with respect to roads, that disconnect in timing of projects happens all the time across. It's very, very difficult to do what we call a curb to curb type approach. So I'm going to rip up the road because I've got to do this section of road. Oh, utility X, utility Y, company C. Do you need to do anything under here too? Because as a resident, right, you're going, why do we keep ripping up these roads 3 times, right? And you kind of want to see some level of effectiveness and things. But there's also times where you're doing that work with the utilities and the assets underneath the ground don't need to be touched.
Sure.
You have to recognize that as well. But yes, coordination of that nature is very difficult. And every city that I'm aware of that I work with has tremendous goals towards that, but it's still very
It will
difficult to
become
achieve.
easier because we are embarking on bringing on a new asset management system to replace the antiquated one we have. So hopefully in 2 years, we have a better way of
Okay.
coordinating. But I would say for the most part on the JRR projects, we are replacing as much, if not all, the underground facilities before we pave.
Yeah.
Especially if it's a total reconstruction.
Yeah.
I would say that we're probably investing a lot of our our cash finance capital right now. That's where it goes, is because DPW says we're going to do this road, and we're like, yeah, fine, crap. Like,
Right.
We'll
do
find
it.
the money somewhere.
Yeah, we'll do it.
Well, and
because
I guess what I'm saying is like, I know DPW only has so much capacity. The contracting community only has so much capacity. So if it were already known, like, if Sewage and Water Board could tell DPW, hey, we already know these are the worst areas that we need to replace. Can you do those next?
True.
So that like we're ready for it.
Mhm.
And like I said, maybe that's happening now, and it just wasn't happening 5 years ago when I was doing
Sometimes they
this.
dictate the
Mm.
pace and the pace. So, yeah, and it was all driven by the settlement based on
Right.
somebody assessing conditions at the
Yeah.
time, and it was a settlement. Like this is the main that you shall replace, but not the one next to it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So,
Can I go back to the car analogy for a second?
Yeah.
Because I think this is really relevant to the conversations and what will probably happen, whether there's 10 or 100 people there, is that will also invoke the Sewage and Water Board as the mechanic and the trustworthiness of the mechanic who is delivering the information about the cost of these various things and the importance of those things. And so I think that is something that just, we all know it, it's an issue, the trust issue, and so want to think ahead about that
That's a
coming
very,
into that.
very good point. Thank you.
Yeah, I think certainly we recognize the challenge there. It's, our hope is that this is a new approach
Mm-hmm.
and that that's recognized in some way, and there's some, that this is us coming and doing a lot of listening, which we've not historically
Yeah.
done.
And providing, I mean, that idea of providing like customer service at that point
Yeah.
is super. Like I just want to say, when I walked in, oh my gosh, the level of customer service just to get me up here was like great. So, and I've heard that from other people calling in for things. So it's being noticed and appreciated. So just like leading with the stellar customer service, I think is really important.
So you had a good experience?
Yeah.
Good, I wasn't sure.
Super nice.
Yeah.
I felt like kind of a royalty or something.
Then I shouldn't share what happened with me. I went down a couple of flights and then I came back up.
Oh, yeah.
I was late though, so it's my fault.
This just got me to the
It's
stairs.
also
I
a very
will own.
confusing building.
And it is,
Yeah,
but
to be
it's,
fair.
and I have been here many times. It just, it's fine. It's
Every
perfectly
corner
fine.
looks the same.
Yes,
every
it's
wall
perfectly
looks the
fine.
Maybe we can, of course, always come back to this discussion of the outreach meetings, but we also really want to get into, we've done a lot of work on a proposal for a new customer assistance program, and that's one of the biggest things that we really want to get a lot of input from y'all on. And this, we want to make it very clear that this is an initial proposal, and the reason we're bringing it to you is because we want feedback, and that this is certainly editable and changeable, and something that we are interested in hearing issues with. So,
Were you
I don't
gonna
know if
cover
Dan-
this one?
This is
Well,
something
did
that you all have seen many times. There's just the sort of minimum bill as it stands today, 56 plus your monthly usage. So,
Right.
I know, yeah. we're
Okay,
just gonna
so
go
let's
with it.
talk to the customer assistance program. So what it really is we were asked to take a look at the existing program, like the help program now, and figure out ways to enhance that, expand that, and grow it, and turn it into a real customer assistance program. This has been something that has been of interest within the industry, the water, wastewater industry, for a number of years, and they are in various stages of implementing them across the nation going through. So if we go to the first one. So we were asked to take a look at what can we do, what kind of a bill reduction could we be looking at, and who would be eligible customers. Now seem fairly straightforward points, but what I want to talk about first is what is your eligible population that you're looking at, right? We know that New Orleans has a 23 to 25% poverty rate. The Sewage and Water Board utility has approximately 142,000 accounts, of which 120,000 are residential accounts. Of the 120,000 accounts, if you look at those and then you apply the available information from the census, that does look into number of people per household, what income levels are, and that type of income bracket, you end up with approximately just a tad under 48,000 accounts that would be eligible for help. If we define a help program as assisting those in need who represent 150% of the federal poverty limit or below.
How many did you say?
100, how many accounts?
How many would be eligible?
Approximately 47.7 thousand accounts. Would you like a more precise number?
I just couldn't,
Sure.
I wasn't sure if you said 42 or 48, so thanks.
But I think what's important here to remember, and it can be very confusing when you look at numbers that are out in the when people are reporting on population and percentages of people and things like that, is that these accounts represent that, accounts. So the person who owns that account would qualify, which means that if you are a renter who pays the rent to your landlord, who is the account owner, you're not in that bucket. And it's because it's very difficult right now to figure out how to get money from the account owner to the person in a rental situation of that nature, to the person who really needs that money, right? To get that discount to that person. This is a problem that we face nationwide. In some states, they're looking at legislation to change, but I do think it's important to remember that, is that you might identify a person who lives in an apartment complex, right, who needs help. We have to figure out the mechanism to get them that help directly, if they are not a water account owner.
They still might be paying the bill, or
Well, normally in an apartment, you pay the rent, and the rent includes the water bill,
right,
right?
right,
However, they proportion the water bill.
right. Yeah.
So how do you get that money? Because there's no guarantee that the landlord or the corporation running the building, the complex, the management company, is going to share that savings with you.
Be eligible to get the savings in the first place. would
Right,
they? Yeah.
but it's because of the way the
And the
account
owner.
is set up, right? They're not the owner. But if you're trying to help the people who use the water, so the question is, how do you get renters of that nature to have an account?
Yeah, but I'd be interested in knowing what that percentage really is in New Orleans, because I have typically seen that in New Orleans, the water's not included. A lot, especially.
It depends on whether they have a separate meter.
Yeah, it depends on whether they have the
Some of the
separate meter,
older
but
places
there's, I mean,
don't.
because we have a lot of the
Doubles.
doubles and the, you know, and the quads and whatever, and they oftentimes do have separate meters. So, I mean, I'd be interested to see where, from a national perspective, just because we have different housing stock here,
Sure,
that
understood.
there could be some differences in how it would look from,
That
in a
would
different
be
environment.
Great.
Which might actually be in our favor.
Yeah.
Right, and I have the census information for New Orleans, so that's what I've based it on. But one of the things about a CAP program is it is iterative, right? Because you make assumptions for that first year of implementation, and then as people join, you start seeing their usage patterns, you start seeing who's a renter, who's an owner, all of those type of implications, and it gives you also an idea of where you need to be focusing that outreach to make sure that those who are in need are aware of the program. Right, so that would be a very good point. And I'm hoping that we can get some more of that granularity. It's very difficult to come by that information. And so we're tapping into different sources. If you have one, I'd love to
No,
share.
I'm just, I mean, even a curiosity, I mean, is it not a data point that can be collected when someone's establishing an account? I mean, is that not already identified in the profile of your account holders, that they are either a renter or you can tie it into, you know, the actual data associated with who owns the property, and then do the names match and do some analysis and cross-referencing, cross-data analysis to determine that as well. I mean, or is it something that could simply be asked, or is it not being asked on the front end?
To the best of my knowledge, that is not
We're not collecting whether the account owner is an owner or renter.
I mean, but
We could going forward.
you could.
but-
I mean, that could just be
Yeah.
a simple data point moving forward that you could capture, and that could be,
Right.
you know, fed into
Right.
that process
exactly.
and to support, and then also a cross-reference to, you know, actually just property
Actual
ownership.
Property ownership, and that's easier to do, but that is something that would be part of the administrative process in
Right.
gathering information.
So that is minutia,
like this.
sorry,
No,
I
and
specialize in
that's
minutia,
very
sorry.
good. No, it is important because, again, the program needs to evolve. These are ideas that we're looking at. So I want to talk about, let's talk about what we're actually looking at as an initial proposal, okay? So we would like to fund 50% of the costs. 50% of the cost for those help customers, we're calling them help for right now, that would qualify. And that equates out to about 1.5 million in the water side, and then 2.2 million on the sewer side, okay? For the first year of participation, we're using a guesstimate of 5,000 accounts. That's equivalent to right now the number of people who were assisted through the LIWAP program. Are you familiar with that one? Okay, great. So not everybody will qualify under help or may not want it, but we thought that was a good starting point number. Participation rates in CAP programs across the nation are very low, In Philadelphia, in its 6th year of operation, now it's up to about 20%.
Is it because of like accessibility issues or onerous process or?
They've worked through the process. A lot of the CAP programs piggyback on what the energy companies use, which is required by law and
Mhm.
regulation, the LIHEAP programs and that qualification. So that's narrowed down the paperwork, the recertification processes. That stuff has been streamlined a lot. There's language barriers. There's technology barriers in terms of I don't have access to a computer. I can't get to this point. There's cultural issues in terms of people being willing to ask for help. There's a number of different issues that are involved. That does not help this, and which is why outreach in your second, third, fourth years of programs really become very important, and where we want to look at in terms of saying, what are the population areas that we're missing? Is it regionally based? Where are the groups of people that we're missing, so that we can make sure that those messages get to them? Right. So it's a whole confluence of different factors. A relevant question to be asked is, okay, so you're asking this amount of money. How are we going to recover that from our customer base? And we looked at a number of different options, and really we felt that the easiest way to do this, and probably the fairest as well as the easiest to implement within the billing system, is a surcharge. And so that would mean that no matter who you are, you would get a dollar amount on every bill. Doesn't vary, it's the same amount. It's similar to that $1 that you pay for LDH, right? So it's of that same nature. With respect to the help customers themselves, we thought that it might be more beneficial if we were to separate them into two tiers of customers. The first tier would be those who are in the 50% and less bucket of the FPL. For point of reference, a 4-person household at the FPL level is an income of $27.7 thousand. Okay, so 50% clearly, that's not a lot, and so we proposed a far more significant discount for this group. For everybody else up to the 150% level, they would also receive a discount, but it would not be as significant, be more modest. The current help program has restrictions on it right now, 62 years of age, a disability. Those would all be removed in the extended program. So that would not be a factor in terms of determining whether or not you would be eligible. This really would be more on an income-based approach. So on the next, what do we have next? So what does that mean for the typical residential customer? Okay. And I want to just point out here that these bills here and that combined monthly charge does not include the $24 a month sanitation charge that you pay for trash and recycling, nor does it include that dollar LDH charge. Okay, so a combined bill here with using 4.4 thousand gallons and with the proposed surcharge would increase approximately $2.20.
So the surcharge is tied to your water usage that month?
No,
Oh, it's
your
just a
surcharge
flat.
is flat. It does not matter how much water you use.
Okay, and then it's attached to, okay.
There's one for water and there's one for sewer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So,
And I'm sorry, and that
Mhm.
that would not change regardless of how many people enrolled in the HELP program.
well, right now it's based upon 5,000 people enrolled in the HELP program.
Okay, so it would go up with success of the program, reaching more of the intended people, correct?
Yes, let me say this. In the first year of the program, we hope to get 5,000.
Mm-hmm.
We could get more than 5,000 if their distribution of where they fit within the buckets is a little different than what census says, right? And then you could fund more people with the 1.5 million or the 2.2 million.
So in other words, if there's more tier 2 than tier 1, because tier 2 gets a less aggressive discount, you can have more than 5,000 in the
Right.
program.
Is there any intention of either pursuing or supplementing with any of the kind of federal programming that may be available to people that qualify within these households that would be qualified for a program that would maybe offset or increase the availability within this model? Like, or is it fully dependent upon this surcharge?
So the way that the federal government has treated water affordability is that it's up to utilities. So there was the low income.
Not about that, but from a, like a homeowner program, homeowner related programs, not necessarily through water utilities and them and the, you know, the Georgia Water Board pursuing, but through other federal programs that are directed towards homeowners in another capacity. Curiosity.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any other programs that could probably feed into this except, I mean, the city could probably direct CDBG money into it if they wanted to.
Right. Just, unless you're looking at something like associated with leaks, like homeowner leaks. And things,
Right.
but it has, you have to be very careful with federal programs,
Okay.
unfortunately, because.
No, yeah,
Yes.
that's
Sorry.
kind of my specialty.
Okay, sorry,
But-
sorry. If there is something,
Right.
you didn't tell me that, Tyler.
Yeah,
Jeez.
well.
So it would come with strings attached then?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just I mean, it was more of a question of, is this, if it is fully dependent, is how it appears right now, but there could be a, you know, could
If
be a
there's
consideration
any
that
way-
could be a way to either
Yes.
expand upon it, you see, show
Definitely.
success, a way to expand upon it, to look at, especially with the different types of funding that's now being made available. And I think that's another, there's openings.
There are openings. I would also say, as you probably know from your experience base, it takes a while for that money to.
Yes, it
filter.
does. Yeah.
And I think it also, you know, there's obviously a huge effort in the water utility community in lobbying for making the low-income water household assistance program permanent,
Yeah.
which was a COVID-only program. And so obviously, if that were to occur, that would impact this somehow. We're not sure what that would look like,
Mhm.
because the way it's been administered is like it filters down to the state, and then it filters to the community action organizations, and then it filters to us. If they were to design it in a way where we could directly get that assistance, then we could use it to increase the base of this program. If it were to be treated like LIHEAP and go down through the state, it would probably have to be a secondary program to this that would be for
Right.
different people for different things.
But I think you hit it right on the head, is that this would be an iteration.
Yeah.
It would allow us to expand this program, and balance out some of the ratepayer type
Yeah.
impacts. And that would be phenomenal, but I wanna see the money first.
And
It's
also-
gotta get
And
to us.
understand.
Yeah,
And
it's
it
gotta
is
get
It's
to
a
us.
big question, all right?
Yeah, to directly address your question, Dana, essentially what you're getting at is, if we have more than 5,000 customers participate, we have to cap it at that. There's gonna have to be a wait list, and until which time there's additional revenue to recover that cost, it's limited to 5,000 customers, or whatever the mix ends up being based on the tiers.
Gotcha. Right,
So, I have two questions.
yes.
Is there any expectation, and is that considered in here, that of like recovering revenue through this program? Like, I guess what I'm asking is, how many bills don't get paid every month? How many of those are because they can't afford it? And through this program, you know, at least they're paying something. So is there an expectation of recovery of revenue? Because, you know, hey, I can't afford $100 a month, but I can afford 50. So if you make it 50, I'll pay it. Is there an expectation for
There is
that?
a level of expectation.
Okay. Is that factored into that fee?
Not directly, no.
Okay.
It's difficult to factor in because we don't ask people why they're not paying their bills now.
Right,
You know,
yeah.
we don't know if they're not paying because they don't want to, which is
Or
unlikely to be the case, but it is possible that
Right.
people are just ignoring their bills.
Yeah.
Or if it's because they can't afford it. But typically, these programs would have a requirement that in order to keep in the program, you have to regularly pay your bills on time, so that it does encourage people who are typically not paying to stay paying. And yeah, in theory, probably most of the people who have delinquencies with us are unable to pay. And so if we're able to bring it down to a rate that they're able to afford, that's cash coming in the door every month
Right.
that we're not getting right now.
Good point.
So the related question is, how does this become reality? Because, I mean, I'm willing to donate $2.20 a month to my neighbors to help them pay their water bill,
Right.
but I would be uncomfortable forcing everybody else to do that, you know? So, I mean, is this like similar to a rate increase that, you know, it's going through that same process of city council and board of
Part
liquidation,
of
all that?
process,
Would be
yeah.
tied to it.
Help out.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just saying, like,
Yes, it would go.
You
to the
know-
It
same
becomes a
process.
fee on the bill,
Right.
Just like they would set any other rate or new fee
Sure.
to be put on the bill. And it just, would mean
I'm,
that those
I'm
funds would
asking
get- Yeah.
where's the ratepayer's opportunity to say no, and it's through their city council person, basically. Okay.
Yeah, once the city council approves, if they approve any changes, and this will be part of it,
Gotcha.
or some form of it, that enable us to collect that surcharge on behalf of the people we're gonna help.
So I wanted to show on the next slide, well, and this is, so what we did is we showed you what that typical bill change would be from everyone going from no usage whatsoever, so similar to that first picturesque one that we had on the ready to serve with all the base level, all the way up to 8,000 gallons of usage in a month, which represents about just a shade under 80% of our residential customers in terms of how much they use. And you can see again, it's about a $2.20 change there going through. Okay, we don't have up and down. It's just very similar. If we go to the next one, now the question comes in is for those customers that we are helping, what does it look like? Same type of configuration with a 5/8 inch meter and 4.4 thousand gallons of usage. You see now that the combined bill for a tier 1 customer, again, those who are the most severely impacted, is close to 60% of the discount. Those in tier 2 receive somewhere between a 23 to, just a shade under 25% discount on their bills, their combined bill. Now, this is another point for those who follow affordability guidelines set out by EPA for utility bills and things. You say a combined bill, you try to keep it to under 4.45%, 4.5% of the household income. What we're looking at here for a tier 1 customer is 2.75% combined. It's just, we just really felt that there's so much need there that imposing much more of a percentage on the income isn't going to help. But they still have to pay in order to receive the discount.
And I think it's important to keep in mind that these are the types of things that we would love to get your feedback on, is if that feels like an extraordinarily generous subsidy. We want to hear that because, to Ann's point, the EPA standard is 4.4%. We're setting it quite a bit lower than that. Perhaps there's something in between that would then bring down that surcharge a little bit, maybe make it a little bit more palatable.
Right.
These are the types of things we want to hear. If you think that $230 a month is totally reasonable and this is a great subsidy and you think that's great, then we want to hear that too. But
So yeah, any inputs, feedback.
But are they using the same guidelines of the 50% of the federal poverty level in the tier 1 and tier 2? So in reality, that's not.
They have no income level things.
They're just using it as a percentage of income.
Right, so your
Everyone's
income
Okay.
would be the
Okay.
same, right?
Okay, that's,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it may not be a completely apples to apples comparison.
No, it's
using
not
that.
necessarily. It is used a lot in affordability guidelines in terms of looking at it. Does it seem reasonable for how much of your bill that you're paying?
Right.
And now, even though those guidelines are undergoing changes with respect to affordability to be a little bit more reflective of reality, you don't want a bill for those who are most severely impacted within your community to be 10%
Right.
of their income. That's not sustainable. So.
Is it kind of a first come, first serve, and then the 5,000 are filled? And
Right now.
And would there be outreach to sort of counter the fact that people who do have the technology on their side, that they would be able to do it where others who might need to walk in or do it?
I think we have to, that's part of the rollout and the implementation. There needs to be an equal sort of rollout of that.
And currently, we have a third party administering our very small, modest program. So I presume they are fully aware of the community and its needs, and maybe how to create a hierarchy to help, or at least not to miss people who are don't have the access that others
Right.
do.
And I think
And-
we would work with Entergy and stuff too, because again, they have programs that are required. So you kind of want to maybe do a one-stop shop.
Yeah, another consideration is that we currently have all those small numbers that we held, they're elderly and below a certain, right?
Yes.
And this does not factor that in, but we can't risk eliminating the folks that already are getting held.
Yeah,
Right,
they,
because
they
they
would
were
essentially
edged,
automatically be enrolled in.
Somehow we have to make
Mhm.
sure that that is protected.
Yeah.
So there's,
That is
I think,
part
about 1,200
Okay.
people who participate in our current
So
program.
that reduced the total availability to 3,800 for additional personnel, because you'd roll that 1,200 in first, and then you would add an additional 3,800.
Yeah, that 1,200 is fairly consistent, but
Yeah.
the actual number of accounts is consistent.
Yeah.
The actual,
Who it is,
right,
yeah.
Yeah, because the way it works now is it's a set subsidy. I think it's $250 per year per customer. And it's just a bill credit once a year. So it's very predictable in terms of, we have the same budget every year for it. $250 divided by the budget is 1,200 customers, and it's, so, but the current program requires that you be both below the poverty line and either elderly or disabled. And so it's a pretty limited pool. I think the current eligibility is only about 4% of our customers are even eligible, and which would be, what about 4,000 to 6,000 customers?
Yeah.
And 1,200 participate, so.
Oh, so that has the same kind of cap as this program does, but it's just under
Limited.
So the
subscribed.
1,200 is the cap for that. That is an
Fine.
actual
because
cap.
Yeah.
of the budget.
Because the
Based
budget,
on
right,
budget,
based
yeah.
on budget,
If
right.
there were more
But you have
funds available,
eligibility
you
is-
could enroll more people.
Right.
There's no like, it says only 1,200, it's just the budget.
The budget limits is a limitation to it, right, that makes sense.
Right.
One other outreach thing that might work is pairing it with the Office of Neighborhood Engagement, their office hours that they have in libraries very regularly. I know District B, it's always in the Rosa Keller Library, and it's like clockwork, and just having that person there as well, because they do a great job of letting people know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if every single council district's Office of Neighborhood Engagement is set up the same, but
We've had, in other areas, we've had like little mini fairs, like enrollment fairs and stuff like that, and to help educate and as to what it does and to outreach and have translators available as well for those who need it.
Tyler, to answer your question about like, is that too much of a subsidy? I don't think, $2.21 versus $1.50. I mean, it's not a big difference. I think I'm imagining the tough sell that you would have standing up in front of a public meeting where you're saying, hey, we're starting to think about raising rates. We also want you to subsidize other people's water bill. And meanwhile, we're doing, we're changing out your meter with a smart meter, but that's not driving up your bill, and which I know that because I participate in this, right? But like, if you're standing up in a public meeting and wanting to tell the public all these things, that's a lot, right? So, I don't know if there's a possibility of not doing it all at once. But yeah, I can imagine your average person in New Orleans having a tough time saying, okay, my rates are going up, they're adding a surcharge, but none of this has anything to do with them changing my meter, I think y'all have been pretty open about your bill might go up because the meter's gonna be accurate, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So if I'm one of those people, then I'm really pissed off, right? Because my bill just went up 3 times for 3 different reasons, right? So I'm imagining the reaction of, a public meeting next month where, I'm assuming it's you personally standing up and saying these things, or maybe Grace.
He was trying to avoid that.
And can't be Tyler?
Tyler all alone, nobody.
I mean, I wouldn't want that job, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So.
We know it will not be an easy sell.
Yeah.
But we have to at least make an attempt, and we are going to be very good listeners. I mean, if the majority of the people say no, we're not prepared for this, let's focus on an increase for revenue, or maybe not even that. I mean, people have spoken, so
But these are all things that will be on the table at those 3 public meetings
Yes.
that you're describing.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that I think it's a lot to ask, but it's also, I personally see this as a critical component of any potential rate increase, in that we know that our most vulnerable customers are already unable to pay their bills.
Yeah.
And
So-
so if we are talking about raising rates, that's only gonna get worse.
Yeah.
And so we need to do something. Unfortunately, though, in order to do that, it requires even more money in order to make sure that those folks are able to pay their bills.
So maybe a part of the sales pitch, if it's possible to predict, is my question before about, is there any expectation of recovering revenue from people who can't afford it, and who can't afford the full bill but might be able to afford some of it? And if that were to happen, then the people who are paying the surcharge are seeing an increased level of service from that additional revenue, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then they're it's not just they're doing a nice thing for their neighbors, but they're also getting something out of it if it results in additional collections that enable the utility to
Yeah.
provide better
You
service.
go back one slide. I mean, if we are to spend the 2 point, maybe one more, the amount of money that we need here, the 1.5, and for us to spend that, and let's say we're giving 50% for easy math, we are gonna get the same amount in revenue, right? Because we only would put it in your name if you put your 50%
Mm.
for it. So yes, it will generate.
Yeah.
It will,
Yeah,
it will
and
break
then-
even, so to speak.
Maybe it is an issue of just how we sell it, in that you're right. The whole thing is in the service of putting the utility in a better financial position overall. Which means that in theory, in 5 years' time, when we go through this financial planning exercise again, either no rate increase or a smaller rate increase at that time. Because the utility is in a better financial condition, we've been able to make capital investments, most of our
Right.
customers are paying, people are, able to afford their bills, and I know it's hard for an average customer probably to sort of wrap their mind around that, and it's also difficult to take that message from us. But I think it's something that we have to kind of take a leap and say, we want this. I'm hoping, this is very much me here, hoping like that this is seen as like, we actually want to do something to help. It's not just that this $2.30 or whatever isn't to go in our pocket.
Mm.
This is us actually trying to do something to show that we're hearing, that there's a challenge here that we can do something about.
And this is just semantics, but even maybe not even so much about, this is about putting the Sewage and Water Board in a better financial position. It's essentially saying the same thing, but saying to improve service overall and consistent service overall, so that it's all about you, customer,
Yeah.
ratepayer. And service delivery, I guess.
Yeah.
And because that also then ties in the smart metering because then it's like, for example, smart metering, that's part of this improved consistency and, service delivery.
Yep. Well, I don't really think we have any more slides. I think unless there's any other questions, the sort of timeline again looks like, in theory, the board is going to give us the authority to sort of start this outreach process at their next meeting. And we would look to schedule these meetings throughout November and December. I think that it would probably make a lot of sense to maybe take all the materials and activities and stuff that we want to use at these meetings to you all at the November meeting, so that maybe we'll do the CAC meeting before we do any of the other meetings, so that we can let y'all kind of play angry citizen if you want, and give us the full assessment of what we're planning to do, because obviously, you know, we want to make sure that we're doing it in the right way and we're approaching things properly. So,
Tyler, also with like outreach and getting word out to people, like, is there, are there some folks that, or organizations that you're bringing on early? I'm thinking CBNO, I'm thinking Water Collaborative, people that are just like pushing information out all the time?
yeah, so certainly around the public meetings, we want to be doing a lot of stakeholder outreach and sort of a soft media launch, so that we can try to, you know, get like some conversations going out there about how we're going to be doing this, and we want to make sure that people are showing up and participating in the progress.
Okay, and that's, that all, those would fall under key stakeholder outreach?
Yeah.
Okay. But that's, so that's November, December,
Mm-hmm.
but also that's when these 3 community meetings, the
Yeah,
public
you see
meetings are
public
also happening.
meetings,
Yeah,
parentheses
okay.
3, yeah.
And then more in February, March?
Yep, so then, you know, essentially in January, we would present then a proposal that's like, this is what we heard, this is what, you know,
Gotcha.
we think we would need. And then essentially, if the board chooses to adopt that, then we would kind of start like a sales pitch, you know, where we do a lot more public hearings and things like that to get out in the community and help people understand what the proposal is, so that we can hopefully, whenever the council, if they do decide to take it up, because it's up to them whether they take it up or not, that they feel that, you know, their constituents have at least been well informed, if not, are at least tepidly in support of whatever the proposal is, and they feel, you know, assured in their ability to support it.
So that was great that you raised your concerns, and I think that those are all very valid in terms of the presentation. Do you all have any other feedback, things that you want us to look at and consider, you know, perspectives? I do not see a lot of like happy faces.
We're very thoughtful.
My bill's going up.
I mean, also, I just want to point out that the advisory committee is a nice mix demographically of not all, we're not all white for starters, and from all over town, and the ones who happen to show up today are, so there might be like just reaching out to Cheryl and others, and just getting their feedback on it would probably be a great.
Yeah,
We'll
this
make
is,
sure the next meeting.
Yeah,
that
I think
they-
that's why I say maybe the October meeting will sort of like repeat this a little bit and go a little bit deeper in depth, and I can do a little more direct outreach to make sure that folks are.
Yeah.
be good, yeah, because we really value any feedback,
You-
inputs that you
You
might
might
have.
ask them too. I wonder if it's hard for them to get here. Like I walked here from work, so like.
Yeah,
But if I didn't work downtown, I'd be like, oh, I gotta drive over there and find a parking spot. You
yeah,
know.
I would like to find a better location. I think it's just figuring out what exactly that looks like. You know, I don't know if like Cheryl wants to host at her office, or we go to Treme Center, or like what community location we go to. But
That'd be fantastic,
I
actually.
do think this space is not necessarily the most conducive to having a customer meeting.
And Kyle, we cannot assume we're raising rates, otherwise, I mean,
That's true.
logical maybe, but.
There is
going
always a
in
no action
neutral to
option.
what the public wants. to
Yeah,
do.
well, but I mean, you know, I recognize the reality. There's a certain level of service you have to provide, or we can't have a city, right? So like, and that costs money.
Yeah.
So, you know, like I said, I'm trying to put myself in the general public's shoes. I think affordability, like I think that's awesome. I think that's great. But you know, I like to think I'm a pretty charitable guy. You know, not everybody's gonna go for that.
Yep,
So.
and we're gonna hear from all sorts of
Yeah.
people with different reactions, so.
All right, thanks,
Thank
y'all.
you all.
Thank you
It's
so
awesome.
very much for your time and your inputs and suggestions and